we didn't when we built the first Wind Up Night, we didn't sit down with the intent to make an auto runner. What happened was we sat down with the intent to make a sort of hard platformer that was fun, and what we ended up with was a game where you don't have directional control. And there was some precedent for that at the time. And we really enjoyed games like Bit Trip Runner and Cannonball and other games that sort of you move automatically forward. But we weren't thinking about the genre of auto runners when we designed this game back in 2011. And because of that, you can see we have a number of very different aspects to our game. Like every one of these levels that you're playing is hand designed. Unlike what I think most automatic runners do, like games like Temple Run, where they're basically infinite or they're put together from pieces on the fly. We like those games too, but that's not what this game is about. We very carefully design these levels, and that's actually quite a bit of work.
It's a platformer first and foremost. It just happens to be a runner because we weren't really happy with directional controls on a touch screen, which is what this normally is played on. So at that point, we decided we try to do different kinds of inputs like swipe mechanics or whatever, and just none of those really ever felt right. And we felt like we needed to have less buttons as possible, and part of that was okay, directional buttons, they just never really work so great on touchscreens, so let's just take directions out of movement out of the equation, just make it move on its own.
Yeah, this is a game that can be played, with just two thumbs, and you have the two buttons on each side, which was a scheme that generally works pretty well, and especially in a game like this where you're kind of with each one kind of triggers an action versus some games that have you move left and right with those types of buttons. It's something that works pretty well. But what you also have is gamepad support in the game, and it's something that not a lot of auto runners have, and you kind of done some funny videos, just kind of showing off some of the controllers you've been testing with. But why was gamepad support so important to you that you're testing out on all these controllers?
Well, originally it was because we always thought of the controls as using a control pad. So if you look at the layout, the shield is the very left one, then it's roll. So if you think of holding a controller in your hand, typically you're going to have the directional pad on your left. So we always think of shield as up, roll is always down, and then you have your two attack, your attack button, your jump button. So your A and B button are on the right. So that's why that layout that's the way it is, because it's totally intentional, right? Because we always had the control pad, or directional button, all that stuff, always was on the back of our mind. And then why did we make the video, Chris?
Well, I personally think that at some point in the fairly near future, there will be some sort of mobile device or device that has access to mobile games that has a controller that you play with as your primary interface. Maybe it's a peripheral that you buy for your phone, or maybe it's something you plug into your TV, who knows. But I think it's important that happen, because there are whole classes of games that we would like to be able to build that we cannot build on a touchscreen. There are also classes of games that we can't build with controller. So we wouldn't want touchscreen gaming to go away. But we want to be, it's very important to us to support controllers, because we would like to live in a world where a lot of our audience has access to a controller to play our games on mobile devices, or at least distributed via mobile ecosystems, and still have access to them on the controller. Because if that happens, there's a lot of really awesome games. So for Wind Up Night in particular, we have been thinking, as Casey said, about it as a sort of controller-based game since day one. So it's very natural fit for us to ship it on a controller. But from a sort of longer-term strategic point of view, it's also about us trying to push the world even a little bit in the direction that we would like it to go, because it would allow us to make cooler games in the future.
Yeah, and that's kind of, I think, the problem right now, that there are gamepads out there, especially on on Android. There's a there's a ton of them, ton of different ones. And iOS is just starting out with the MFI gamepads, and there's a bunch of the iCade controllers out there.
Right.
But it's like even there's a lot of games that even feel like though they should support gamepads, they don't. And a game that doesn't support a gamepad, if it feels like it should, like it could, then that limits it. It's a game you can't play on your TV. It's limiting, and yeah, and having more of these gamepad games is kind of a good way to, I guess, to get get people to buy more controllers and to get more support for them, because when you have when you buy these gamepads, and these mobile gamepads are so expensive too. Like you can't buy an iOS gamepad for less than $80 at this point. And when you spend that money, you want content to play with with those gamepads, but that's often the problem is you don't know what supports a gamepad and what doesn't, because it's hardly universal from, I think, a developer perspective as far as using it.
And I don't blame other developers for sort of not paying attention to this stuff yet, because honestly, the market doesn't exist yet. We're expecting a market to exist sometime in the future, and we're trying to push the viability of that market ahead of time. But there is really no gamepad market for mobile devices today. And gamepad support isn't easy. Even in a game like this where we only have a few inputs, it's necessary that all of your UI screens work with controllers, and that requires a concept of focus, like which button am I going to press when I hit this button, and that has huge implications for how you design your mobile application. So we spend a lot of time on this stuff because it's important to us. But I think that a lot of other developers are kind of in a wait and see mode, where they're waiting for the market to materialize before they do anything. But if you think about it from a platform holder, or the perspective of somebody who wants to make one of these devices, the problem that they've got to solve is if they ship the controller by itself, nobody will buy it. Who's going to buy a game system that doesn't have any games you can play? They need to ensure that there's content first. So we are sort of trying to do our part to make sure that there's content available for some future platform to exist on. We've also shipped on Ouya and platforms like that, because stuff's important to us. Whether or not we think one particular platform is going to be the successful one, we would like to be there when the successful one hits. And also, this game is awesome with the controller. It works really well. And because we've made a sort of skill-based platformer, having the ability to do really fine-tuned controls is a big deal, and it helps. It helps you, do the more difficult moves a lot. You can still, we play the game mostly with touchscreen, but on a controller, it's phenomenal.